Hello, welcome everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Navigating Staffing Challenges in Spite of Economic Uncertainty. This webinar is sponsored by Weave, a software development platform that helps communication between your patients and your customers. I am Ryan White, and I'm excited to welcome our speaker today. Our speaker is Ryan Vett. He is an MBA and an international speaker and author that focuses on leadership, business, and customer experience. He has presented to audiences around the globe on 4 different continents and has been featured on USA Today, Financial Times, ABC, CBS, NBC, Forbes, and many other entrepreneurial endeavors. He's passionate about spurring others on towards the positive change in their career, their business, and their personal lives, and has had a particular impact on the medical industries and helping them build up their practices. Ryan, I can keep going on and on if you want.
Oh, I appreciate that, Ryan. Thank you.
Well, we're going to go ahead and get to the presentation, but before we do, if you have any questions about the content, you can feel free to send us a message. If you're on the website, you'll be able to see the live chat functionality. You can interact with that. Also, if you have questions about Weave itself and its capabilities, there should be a button that will allow you to schedule a demo to get a little bit more insight into the features itself. All right, enough about Weave and about us. Let's really talk about the challenges that have been introduced lately about staffing, hiring, and ultimately just keeping your office and your business fully functioning. Ryan, I go ahead and kick it off to you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. We should have a talk show, Ryan and Ryan or something. I love it. But this is a big topic, right? Staffing challenges, economic uncertainty, the word recessions being thrown around. And we have turnout, the great resignation, turnover rather, burnout. We have all these different topics that seem to be the main point of so many conversations. And really, for many small business owners, practice owners, managers, leaders, it's the thing that keeps you up at night. You're worried about keeping your team. You're worried about keeping your team happy. You're worried about making sure that your clients, your customers, your patients are cared for well. And you're really worried about what the impact of the changing economy, both here in the United States and abroad, is going to have on your business and on your bottom line. So, over the next few minutes together, I want to explore sort of what's happened over the last several years. And then we'll finish up with some tactics that you can employ to really effectively navigate the staffing challenges you might be facing, and the economic uncertainty. And we'll talk about ways to some tactics to employ to be able to navigate that as successfully as you can in some stormy water. So let's dive in. Since 2020, we all know what happened in 2020. I'm not going to totally rehash history, but since 2020, there have been 3.4 million less workers in the United States than ever before. Now, that does not mean people that have left their job and ultimately came back. In fact, that number would be closer to 4 or 5 million. But what we're looking at here is the literal number of people that were in the workforce at the beginning of 2020 that today, here sitting in Q4 of 2022, are no longer in the workforce. This is according to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce as well as the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So we've seen a massive exodus from the labor force. Now, if you're like me, 3.4 million people is a number. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and I can't put that into something tangible. So let me put it this way for you. Here's the impact of 3.4 million people. If you are a U.S. State buff and you know all these flags, you're going to know where I'm going with this. But if you combine the total populations of the total states of Wyoming, Vermont, by the way, from left to right, Wyoming, Vermont, Alaska, North Dakota, and South Dakota. If you combine the total populations of all of those 5 states, that is 3.4 million people. So it's the equivalent of these 5 states' populations no longer being in the workforce. Now, obviously, the unemployment numbers are not correlated to these states in any way. I'm simply trying to illustrate the true impact of what 3.4 million people leaving looks like. Now, you might be suffering from team members leaving your office, your practice, your company, your workplace, even your team, whatever it is, you might be feeling this impact. So let's dive in on some of the root causes and figure out how we can employ practices to make sure we keep our team members around and happy. I do want to focus on healthcare. Healthcare is a big industry that saw one of the more profound impacts of this mass exodus from the labor pool. Some people call it the Great Resignation. There's a lot of different terms for what has happened in the labor force, but let's look at the impact on healthcare. First of all, this is according to U.S. News and World Report. There's right now, as of today, about a 1.1 million person shortage when it comes to nursing. We need 1.1 million more nurses today, right now, in the United States to be able to fulfill all of the needs. That's why you're seeing incredible signing bonuses of anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 for nurses to pick up and move across the country to work for a year, get paid sometimes as much as double as what they were getting paid before, and get these massive signing bonuses that before were only reserved for executives at large companies. Now we're seeing this crisis have a major impact on healthcare. What else is interesting is that at the beginning of this economic crisis and this employment crisis, we saw 18% of all healthcare workers. That's across the board, everything from doctors and dentists and veterinarians to nurses and hygienists, dental assistants and med techs, vet techs, all across the board. We saw people that were practicing healthcare providers. 18% of them quit their jobs and just left. So why does this happen? Why did people all of a sudden up and leave? Of course, there were circumstances in our globe that we had never experienced before with a pandemic that caused pressures for people to leave. But now that we are coming through a lot of those fears and a lot of those uncertainties with what living with COVID looks like, there's still a large number of people, that 3.4 million number, that never returned to work. So let's unpack some of those root causes of why there have been these changes in the labor force, how that impacts your business, and what you can do about it. First of all, these are the top reasons for not returning to work that we see. First of all, retirement, lifestyle, and money. And I'm going to look at each one of these with you now. Right now, 89% of the labor shortage increases were those 55 and older. 89%. So of that 3.4 million people, about 89% of that was reserved for those 55 and older. Many people took COVID and this time away from work as an opportunity to say, you know what? I've worked long enough. I don't want to have to deal with the stress. I'm burned out. I'm going to retire. This was a big change. We've never seen such a large number of individuals retire at the same time ever in US history. So that was one big cause. Honestly, that population, there's not a lot you can do about it. They have worked their years and now they're rolling into retirement. But that still leaves about 11% of the workforce that is still sitting on the sidelines that has decided not to come back to work for whatever reason. Most of these boil down to what I'd call the category of lifestyle or the category of money. So, for example, with lifestyle, they're 28% of women and 17% of men, having stayed at home for some period of time in 2020, realized that their lifestyle was actually okay. They could keep up with with the lifestyle they liked if one of the two income earners stayed home. Sometimes that was to stay home to care for an elderly parent, to care for a child. We all know that pets were a big thing in COVID, and many households increased in getting pets during COVID. Some people just wanted to stay home. And so lifestyle was a big one. Along with lifestyle comes work-life balance and the flexibility of being remote or in a hybrid work environment. Almost 56% of all jobs went hybrid or remote during that period and stayed that way through the remainder of 2020. When workplaces started opening back up and requirements to come back to office were there on the table, some employees did not want to do that anymore. And so lifestyle, again, a big part of it. The other big aspect of lifestyle is childcare. We have seen a massive drop in childcare facilities and their ability to bring in new children in a safe quota way. They have to have a certain number of adults to a certain number of children. And so they've been reducing seats at childcare facilities, meaning that it is necessary for one caregiver or one parent to stay home with a child. That might not have previously been the case. So those are some of the lifestyle aspects. Now let's talk about money. As we can all guess, this is one of the leading reasons, and we'll unpack some specific statistics in a minute, but this is one of the leading reasons people switch jobs or leave a job, but it also is something that came up very clearly in 2020. So specifically when it comes to money, 68% of people said that they earn more on their unemployment because of the CARES Act than they did at their main job. 68%. That's more than two thirds. Two out of every three people said that. And we'll dive into some of those careers in just a second. But that's a pretty significant chunk of people. The other group said, you know what, I've got enough money in savings. I'm going to ride this out till I get the opportunity I want. And so people would leave their jobs and still haven't returned because they're living on savings or even tapping out their 401ks or other sorts of retirements, waiting for things to either get back to normal or get back to the way things were. One thing I failed to mention with the lifestyle is that 3.5 million moms left their jobs during COVID, and only a fraction of those have returned since. And so we're seeing all of these different things impacting and influencing the top reasons why people are not returning to work. This is, again, from the US Chamber of Commerce, as well as several articles and research from CNBC and the Harvard Business Review. So very specifically, let's look at that money thing. That's one of the big things. More than 2/3 of people said that they earned more with the CARES Act than without the CARES Act. Here's a graph, and I'm not going to necessarily go through all of this, but what we'll see is this middle dotted line here at the 100%. It says this is when unemployment benefits are equal to lost earnings, meaning if you earned $1 at your workplace, your unemployment benefit was also $1. Anything to the right of the line means you actually earned more because of unemployment, and anything to the left of the line means you earned less. Probably no surprise here on most of these industries. You can see who did earn more and who did not. This graph is taken from 538 as a resource that I wanted to share with you all. It's a great article called Many Americans Are Getting More Money from Unemployment Than They Were from Their Real Jobs. Highly recommend you take the time to dive into this. But what does this tell us? This tells us that some people believe that working actually costs them more money. And we have seen that in the return or lack thereof back to the workforce. In fact, a specific story was featured in USA Today with a lady named Ashley, who was a dental assistant. Now, the picture on the right is not actually a photo of Ashley, but representative of her. See, Ashley was doing really well. She loved being a dental assistant, but then during this whole shakeup, she decided to take a bartender job at a local brew pub in Woodstock, where she's from. And she was very quickly taking home about $1,400 every 2 weeks. That was 40% more than her dental job, and she was putting in half the hours. So in just 2 weeks, she could take home $1,400, 40% more than her job that she had gone to school for training as a dental assistant, and yet she was working half the time. It's no wonder that she was exploring other options. It's a great article that is on US Today. It says U.S. wage. The title of it's U.S. wage growth and retail restaurants now pay. Job pay now rivals skilled jobs. So I highly recommend that. It also outlines the protest and the fight for $15, and you're seeing unionization in many states. We saw most recently Starbucks and their fight against unionization, and we're seeing these pay wages increase. And again, we all know that people always want to get paid more. It's one of the first things they ask for. But is that really the thing that they need to be able to join a new career and stick with it? So with all these things we're talking about, not trying to be doom and gloom, but trying to lay out the facts, because in order to be able to move forward, we have to understand what's going on. So what can we do about this churn? What can we do about these employees leaving the workplace? What can we do to really incentivize employees to join our teams, to join our practices, to join our companies, and then stay? That's the other big piece. Getting someone is half the battle, but getting them to stay is the other half. We're seeing people start a job and show up for one shift and then not come back. That's happened so many times. Or people don't even show up for their first day because they're job hunting. They're pitting things against each other. So what can we do about the churn? First of all, let's unpack what employees really want. Now let's take a step back and see kind of what else was going on in 2020. In 2020, 4.4 million new businesses were started in the US alone. 4.4 million businesses. That is a tremendous number of businesses, almost 4 times the average annual number of new businesses. What were people thinking? Well, in this study that Salesforce did, which is a big software company, what they did was they started to unpack some of the things that caused people to want to start these businesses in 2020. Obviously, being at home was a big factor. They didn't have the oversight of their boss or manager hovering behind their cubicle. And so people had the flexibility and freedom to hop on their computer and dive into something that maybe they had wanted to do for quite some time. The other big statistic that's really important to note, though, is 57% people started a business to be their own boss. They were tired of the stress of the workplace. They were tired of having to report to someone. They wanted that flexibility. And we're going to talk about flexibility in a minute. They wanted to be their own boss. They wanted to control their own destiny. In fact, throughout history, we've seen this. If you look at the generational cohorts, and we're not going to get into this, but I'm passionate about generations. I speak across the country on the different generational cohorts. And one of the things that we see is when things around a generational group are out of their control, they immediately try to cling on to things that they can fix in their own backyard, so to speak. And this is what we saw so many individuals doing during this great resignation, this mass exodus out of the workforce. And so people try to do something they control. For me, in reading this study, and I don't have it on the slide, but one of the most fascinating parts about it was 80% of these small businesses were self-funded. So it means that there is wealth in America, or at least enough wealth that is able to start a business, able to pay for the LLC paperwork or the corporation paperwork, able to begin to build that website and get the necessary things to start that business. So that's what employees really want, right? They want that flexibility, they want that freedom, they want that control. They want to be in control of their own destiny, their own pay, and they want to take that into their own hands when it feels like everything around them outside of their control is falling apart. But let's look at some of the specific things. Pew Research did this study, and so this is a graph again from Pew Research. You can look this up, but it really talks about the data as to why people quit their jobs. Um, it's probably no surprise to anyone listening today that the major reason and the one of the leading minor reasons for people leaving their job, their pay was too low. They weren't getting paid what they felt that they deserved. That's probably not a surprise to anyone. We'll unpack that shortly. But let's look at the next couple because those are actually really fascinating. Number one, or actually it's number two on this list, they had no opportunities for advancement. That means they were in a dead end job, or they felt that, whatever they were doing, sitting at that cubicle, sitting chair side, sitting at that front desk, working in an office, whatever it might be, they felt that that was it for them. There was no opportunity for personal growth and development. And so they were stuck. The next one was they felt disrespected at work. Look at how significant of a number of people felt that this was a major reason for them leaving their workplace. They felt disrespectful. Of course, you have some of the other things on here that we see childcare issues, which is challenging for most employers to step in and help with. Flexibility is another big one. A lot of times, specifically in service industries as well as medical industries, you feel like you don't have as much flexibility because patients need to be seen at a certain time or customers need to be served coffee at a certain time. And we'll talk about that in a moment. We see that as the fifth reason. Benefits weren't good. Some people just relocated to a different area. I've got family members that decided to move out west into just kind of change up their whole scenery and their whole lifestyle during this time. So you see all these different things, and then of course working too many hours. Well, what if employees said, what if we took this top line away? So Pew Research says pay was too low, meaning they're not getting paid enough. What if we just took that compensation piece away for a minute? What was interesting was Sloan at MIT. What they did was they took this analysis and they said, "Hey, we're going to base this analysis off how important relative to compensation certain things are." And so, if you look at the very top thing, they're saying that a toxic corporate culture is 10 times more significant to somebody than compensation. If you were to take compensation out of that picture, toxicity. That means people want to love where they work. If they show up to work and it's a terrible work environment and they hate their coworkers and they know they're going to be berated and all of that, that's 10 times more significant, 10.4 times more significant to them than compensation. It actually sort of makes sense if we go back here. A large number of people said a major reason for leaving is they feel disrespected. These correlate. The next big one, not nearly as significant, but still 3 times more important if you take compensation out of the equation, is job insecurity. They're afraid that they're going to lose their job. This is a big thing right now during economic uncertainty. People are looking at the economy around them. They're seeing their stocks skyrocket one day and tank the next day. They're seeing a global crisis with different economies struggling. They're seeing crisis with war in Eastern Europe. They're seeing all these things around them. They again are trying to cling to something that's stable. It's the reason why people left their jobs and 4 point some million new businesses were started in 2020. People want security. And so we see job insecurity or just that fear of not knowing causing a large reason for people to want to ultimately quit and leave their job. Lack of innovation is a reason people leave their jobs. If you own a medical or dental or veterinarian practice and you have not updated your office in years and it looks like it was built back in the 80s and your equipment is about that old, uh, not only are that's a patient experience conversation, but your team is also seeing them. They're saying, "Hey, you're not looking to invent and invest in being the best that you can be." And that doesn't give a team member a lot of motivation to want to stick around because it's been the way it's always been. Now, maybe that helps with job security, but it also gives them this lack of innovation. The last two, failure to recognize employee performance is a big one. If you've got team members and you're not recognizing them when they do a good job, that's pretty significant. A great book I love and I recommend to anyone that manages even one person is called The 1 Minute Manager. It's a really short, easy read, but it helps you manage more effectively to give that recognition when needed, but also give needed correction. Part of managing is being able to have the tough conversations and be able to get your team on course. And so that's a great one. But obviously, recognizing their success is critical. And the final one, some people just left their jobs because of a poor response that their company had to COVID. So we've seen all these things, right? We've seen all these things as to why people leave. Now, how do we get people to come and stay? So in our last couple minutes together, let's focus on that aspect. If you know the reason why someone's leaving, that gives you the tool to keep them. You know why people are inclined to leave. So just fix those things in your business, your team, your workplace, your office, and make your company, your practice, a place that that no one wants to leave, that they have to stay. Let me point this one out here. So strive to be here. Here's 4 tips that I'm going to go through that are going to help you to help you implement things that don't have to cost you more money in the midst of economic uncertainty, but it also will help you retain your team. So first of all, strive to be the best place to work. As we looked at just a minute ago, culture is 10 times more significant to team members than pay. They would rather feel respected at work, be recognized at work, come to a place where they know that they're going to enjoy being there. I love this sign. I'm sure you've seen it at at touristy spots or at office motivation stores, wherever, Amazon. But love what you do and do what you love. You've heard the old adage; it's been around forever, but it is so true. Often in so many careers, it can become monotonous doing the same thing over and over again. That's true in healthcare, medical, dental, veterinary. A lot of what is done every day. Sure, there's some adventure in there and in some unique cases, but a lot of it's monotonous or can be monotonous. So culture is 10 times more significant to most employees than pay. So strive to be the best place to work. Do fun things. Yes, it costs a little bit of money, but bring in lunch one day, or even get a local company to support your lunch and do a lunch and learn. Recognize birthdays, have cards, do balloons, do things that engage your team and make them feel loved, make them feel respected, and help them to want to come to work every day. Maybe it is updating your waiting room. Maybe it is updating your break room or cleaning it out or having snacks available, whatever it is for your office and your team. And you know your team. So do what makes sense for your team, but figure out how to continually improve your culture. And that always is going to be more significant than pay. It could be as simple as asking your team, hey, what are 3 or 4 things that you would love to see me do here to better your experience when you come to the office every single day? You might be surprised what they say. It might not be as hard as you think. Obviously, one of the things that I'm sure you thought I was going to say, and I'm sort of going to say it, but hopefully not the way you thought, is pay is important, right? Pay is so important to employees. But in economic uncertainty, the last thing you probably feel like doing is paying your team members more. And I get it. So I'm not going to necessarily advocate to pay your team members more. However, if you're not paying what market rate is, I would strongly encourage you to revisit that. But there are alternative ways to incentivize loyalty because what is more costly then team pay is having a valued team member that knows your clients, that knows your customers, that knows your patients. Having that team member leave and go somewhere else, that is one of the most costly things for your business. In fact, in a recent article on Harvard Business Review, it they showed, and Gallup also showed this study. It cost the United States about $1 trillion last year in turnover, in employee turnover. So one employee leaving a company to go to another, that was the cost. In fact, what Harvard Business Review says is that it costs anywhere from 1 to 2 times the employee's annual compensation to actually um, replace them. So what that means is if an employee makes $50,000 a year, it could cost anywhere from $100,000 to $150,000 to replace that team member. Now, how do they get that number? That's everything from relationships to knowledge of how your team, company, practice works, training time, cost to replace the person, paying them out, vacation. There's a whole lot of numbers that go in that. But the reality is, between Gallup's research and Harvard's research, the US lost about $1 trillion due to employee turnover. Don't let your practice or business or team become another statistic in that. So, what are some ways to incentivize loyalty? You could structure a 401k plan in such a way, if you're a small business, that there's profit sharing. If you have a profitable year, reward your team with profit into their 401k. The benefit of that, you're also getting tax advantages, and you're, as a practice owner, most likely going to get a little bit of bump in your own 401k. Other things that are really easy to do, again, I mentioned it earlier, celebrate anniversaries, celebrate milestones. If you are at a dental practice and your hygienist is just seeing their 1,000th patient, celebrate that. Milestones are really an easy way and sort of out of blue way, unexpected way to recognize somebody. If if you have the opportunity to celebrate birthdays or anniversaries, anything at your practice that makes sense, or at your workplace, I highly encourage you to do that. The other big thing is show them their growth trajectory as far as compensation goes. Do you give annual raises? Are those based on inflation, or are they based on performance? Are they flat rate? Talk to your team members about their long-term compensation plan, because right now all they're seeing is the paycheck that comes into their bank account every single month. They're not seeing the long-term plan. So remind them of what your company's goals are for compensation. If there's different pay brackets for performance, if there's production based pay, whatever it might be, always remind them of that and give them that forward looking view so they can see that their loyalty to your team, your company, your organization, your practice is very valuable, and that you are rewarding it. Obviously, money does speak. It is one of the leading causes, but culture is far more significant than money. So that's why that's number two. Number three, promote growth. In fact, 68% of all people, this is across all industries and all organizations, including those who had not received a college degree, all the way through those who had PhDs. So this is pretty much everybody in the workforce right now. 68% of people want new skills and they desire to grow. Sometimes that's someone wanting to pick up woodworking. If they've got a 9 to 5 desk job, they might want to do woodworking at home or mountain biking. But also that counts professional skills. People want to be better at what they do every single day. They want to be the best that they can be. So this could be something as simple as providing continuing education for your team. If you're in the healthcare or medical, dental, veterinary space, that would be a great way to engage your team. Maybe do a fun outing. There's a lot of fun CE out there. It doesn't have to be watch a webinar. Not saying webinars are boring. Hopefully you're not finding this one boring, but there are fun CEs. You can go on excursions. You can go on trips. You can do wine tastings, all these different things. And those are mixed with continuing education. So make it fun. The other things that you can do is give them opportunities for growth within your team or within your company. Sometimes there's not a lot of opportunities for growth. If you do run a medical or dental practice, you have your medical assistant, your nurse, maybe an NP, and MD, and the roles are pretty defined. Same with veterinary or dental. These are defined roles that people typically have, and you don't have that ability to climb like you might in a corporate setting. But things that you could do is say, hey, there's other opportunities that I want you to be involved in. at our practice. Maybe it's switching to community outreach or working more with referring practices, something like that. I own a lot of coffee shops and wine bars and things like that. One of the things we incentivize our team members with for growth is saying, hey, if you reach these thresholds, then we will pay for you to go. If it's in one of our people in our wine department, we pay for them to go to Napa and get education from the Napa Wine Academy or something similar so that they can have a fun trip. They've earned it, but it also develops them as a professional and they get a certification or a pin. There's similar things within each one of pretty much every vertical to get additional certifications, to get additional titles, credentials, whatever it might be. Use those things as an opportunity for your team. And guess what? It usually doesn't cost as much as a pay raise, but it often creates a much more sticky employee and someone that doesn't want to leave right away. Um, the other thing you've got to look at is balance and flexibility. Balance and flexibility. One of the biggest things that we see is that when someone leaves a job, and this is from Pew Research, when someone leaves a job, they find for flexibility, 53% of them, so a little more than half, but barely more than half, find the net other job to be more flexible. What does that mean? There's a 50-50 shot that when someone's promised flexibility in a new job, that they're actually going to get that. The same is true with the flexibility in when they can work. And so that's about 50% according to this study. So half of the people that leave a job for flexibility are going to get it. Half of them are not. So half of them are going to have more work-life balance. Half of them are not. So the reality is if you can show them that you are willing and flexible to give them that work-life balance, that's going to be extremely beneficial to you in keeping and retaining your team members. So, what are a couple ways you can do this? One of the hardest areas is in the service industry, right? Or in the medical, dental, veterinary industry, where you have set hours and you have customers, clients, patients expecting to come see you during a set amount of time. Whenever I talk to healthcare providers, I say, hey, why does your practice open at 7:30 a.m.? Well, that's what our patients expect. Is it though? You've trained your patients on when you're open. If you're a dental hygienist and you're sitting in the chair, my dental hygienist always does, first of all, asks me which of two appointments I want, which is always a good strategy because I can't say yes or no. I have to pick one or the other. So always offer two options, both with a positive outcome. But she'll say to me, hey, Ryan, do you want our 9 a.m. on Thursday or our 2 p.m. on, Friday? Those are the two options she gives me. I didn't ask if they were open at 7:30. She gave me a 9 and a 2. I'm naturally going to choose that. Now, of course, this is a much longer conversation, and there are advantages to being open earlier, later, nights, weekends, things like that to capture a larger audience. But at the same time, you could consider having a unique schedule where maybe one day you get out early, or you have a day off, or you give every other team member, or every other Friday you give a team member the Friday off. There's all sorts of different opportunities that you can engage with flexibility. The other thing is maybe have a more flexible working schedule. A lot of schedules are paid. A lot of healthcare schedules are really booked far out at this point in time. However, maybe you can say, "Hey, there's this flexibility within your working day." So try to be creative and think about how to be flexible. This does not mean that when someone calls you first thing in the morning and says, "Hey, I don't feel like coming in today, or I'm coming in 2 hours late." That's a whole different conversation, and that's a management conversation. But there are ways to improve your schedule to be able to make sure people can be home for their kids' sports, or be there for drop off, or if a parent's traveling, have that flexibility to make sure that someone else can get the kids to school. So be creative with balance and flexibility, and realize that this is a leading reason why people leave their workplaces. So, what do we do from here? A little step forward is still progress, right? And in this time where it feels like the economy might be just up in the air, and recently a large bank CEO on their earnings call said the economy is like a hurricane. They might feel sometimes like the wind's blowing, things are whipping around, and all of that, but just do something, right? A little step, a step forward is still progress. And so I would encourage you to take those 4 tips and figure out how you can make sure that your office, your practice, your team is the very best place to work. make team members feel respected, make them love coming into work every day, make them enjoy what they do, give them a vision and purpose. If you're just, if you're doing something every single day and it feels monotonous, talk about how they're impacting life, how they're making an impact. Whether you're just doing eye exams every day and it seems like the same thing every day, no, you're giving someone the opportunity to see leaves on trees like never before. That's what happened to me. I didn't realize in fourth grade when I first got my glasses that I couldn't see the individual leaves on trees as I was driving down the highway. But giving your team those perspectives, it's not just about filling a tooth. It's about giving someone the ability to be proud of their smile. So you have all these opportunities. So be the best place to work. Give them a vision for long term. Incentivize loyalty, right? That's the second one. Incentivize loyalty. Turnover is costly. In fact, I like to think about it like a cereal box. If you ever remember getting like Hot Wheels in the bottom of Fruit Loops or Cinnamon Toast Crunch, you could eat through the cereal and hope the Hot Wheels was going to be on the bottom, or you could flip the box over and pull the Hot Wheels out because it was already on the bottom. So open the box from the bottom and pull it out that way. Incentivizing loyalty is the same way. Turn it upside down. Figure out, you've already got the team member there, so don't let them leave. Figure out what you need to do to incentivize them to stay, whether that's simply recognition, making them feel respected, putting a picture of your team with permission on social media, and promoting how awesome they are. Whatever it is, incentivize loyalty. Number 3, promote growth. Look for opportunities to give personal and professional development to your team members. Pay for their certifications. Allow them to take time off to go to continuing education. Have a fun lunch and learn. Whatever it might be, figure out those ways to promote growth. And finally, look for ways to establish balance and flexibility. Acknowledge that families are important to many people. Personal lives are important. And you want to recognize those and honor those as much as you can, while also caring for your patients and for your clients and for your customers. So take each one of those 4 tips, and I hope that those help you in the midst of navigating some of the staffing crisis in the midst of economic uncertainty. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for the presentation. Absolutely fantastic content. One thing I wanted to ask about was you talked about recognition being so important, and establishing that culture of constantly giving good and positive recognition. You've worked with a lot of businesses and a lot of different medical practices, offices all over the country. What have been some of the creative ways you've seen some of these businesses and offices recognize their employees or recognize other people on the team?
Great question, Ryan. I think one of the things you frequently see is team members talking or having like team member share boards, shout out boards, whatever you might want to call it. So there's a bulletin board where it's like, hey, Ryan did a great job today. And you don't know what Ryan I was talking about. Ryan did a great job today. And, he did X, Y, and Z. Congrats. Kudos boards are great. But often what people long for more than anything else is the recognition of their manager, leader, practice owner, things like that. So one of the simplest things that I've seen be most successful, it sounds almost too juvenile to be real, is a manager taking the time to stop, pull Ryan aside and say, Ryan, you did this specific thing well today. Call it out. Don't say, hey, you did a good job today. Say, hey, Ryan, you did an awesome job facilitating this webinar today. The question you asked at the end was fantastic, and you made a better experience for our viewers today. Thank you for doing that. And
Absolutely.
that is sometimes one of the most valuable things that you can do.
Yeah, and especially the specificity is so important, because when you tell someone they did a good job, they have that overall thank you, I feel good. But when you're
Right.
acknowledging exactly what they did well, you're reinforcing good behavior so that they keep doing that well. If they're treating a patient correctly, if they're, spending an extra phone call to, call out and try to get someone else to come to the office who hasn't been in a while, that's the type of effort you want to encourage and therefore reinforce it by recognizing it.
Absolutely. I think the other big component is recognizing when an employee sacrifices something personally for their work, whether that's not able to go to the kids' soccer game or, working extra long hours, or like you said, Ryan, like taking an extra phone call, maybe on the way home from work, whatever those things are. Recognize when someone sacrifices for their job, because that often goes unnoticed, and that creates that animosity, and one of the reasons why people feel disrespected.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your education and for this presentation. If you have additional questions, is there anywhere anyone can reach out to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I am super easy to find online. Just Ryan Vet. VET is my last name. RyanVet.com. You can find me on social. You can shoot me an email from my website. I'm pretty easy to track down. I'm happy to answer any and all questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you so much for your time, and for all those that are viewing, thank you for tuning in. If you have additional questions about Ryan Vet, feel free to reach out to him, as well as if you have additional questions about Weave and what we can do to help alleviate some of that stress for your team and your managers to make everything flow a lot easier in your job. You can find more information below, as well as schedule a demo.